Hello and welcome to this video 8 of the Blender 3 course. This one is about curves and empty objects. Curves are somewhat different from your basic meshes. So you can see in meshes you always have vertices, and whatever you do happens with these vertices. Now in curves you have two other vertices connected to each vertex, and they are known as control vertices. So if I go in here and I add a curve with the Shift A, curve, you have two here on the top. One is Bezier and the other one is a Bezier circle. This is for open curves and this is for closed curves, and I will go through both of these. What you have down here are other parts that can be constructed with curves. You can get these if you go to your edit preferences, search for curve and turn on add curve extra objects. And while I'm here, I'll say that sapling tree gen and IV gen are two add-ons that use curves with which you can grow ivy on your buildings, or you can create various trees using the sapling tree generator. But now that I have the add curve extra objects on, Shift A will give me all of these. Without the extra objects you only get these Bezier and circle. So I will put on the Bezier, and as you can see I have a curve in here. If I go into edit mode, you can see that the curve actually has two vertices. One is here and the other one is here. This one has two control vertices. One is here and the other one is here. And whatever you do with these control vertices will define the form of the curve. So if I go into my top view like so, and I grab this vertex here and move it with the G, it will move the entire curve. If I grab this one here and I move it, it will rotate the curve around the actual curve vertex. So this is the control vertex. And if I grab this one and scale, it will scale the curve itself. I can also pick a vertex that I see in a place where I like, and I can then hit E to extrude from that vertex. I get another pair of vertex and control vertices. So now I can rotate this one here, I can scale this one here, and now the curve looks like this. And as you can see, since I was not in my top view, I'm already going into the third dimension here, which may or may not be useful. I would say that what you want to do for the most part is to stick to your top view when you are doing stuff with curves, or the side views. Don't use the user perspective that much. Okay, I will go back to my top view, delete this and add another curve and try to make a sine wave here on the screen. So Shift A with a Bezier curve. Oh, by the way, the NURBS curves are non-uniform rational B-splines. They are a different type of curves, and I haven't found much use for them, but I know that if you want to create curve-based surfaces, which you can do here, NURBS curve, circle, surface, whatever, these are probably much more versatile than mesh-based objects. But here I will add a curve, a Bezier curve, and I will go into edit mode, grab this one, move it on the x-axis, like so, maybe go down, grab on the y-axis, yeah, grab this one on the x-axis, And then I'll just go in here and rotate this, move up, scale it, rotate this, scale those two on the x-axis at the same time, move this on the x-axis, okay, and scale the whole thing like so. I can also move the origin to geometry, which puts it here in the center. So if I now snap the cursor, the selection to cursor, I get it here in the middle. Okay, that is close enough to a sine wave. The thing with curves is that they only have length. So if you hit a F12 to get a quick render of this, you will not see much because it doesn't have any other features except length. So it won't show in your render. What you can do is to go here into your properties, and in here you have a new one looking like this, and that is the Bezier curve. It has a specific set of settings in here. And for example, if you go into the geometry and you want to make this into a tube, you can manage that by merely going in here and saying adding to the depth. So now you have a tube. The resolution can be down to 0, which will give you a square tube, or it can be 1, which gives you 6-sided, 8-sided, and so on. Resolution of 7 will give you a fully round tube. If you want to fill the caps, merely just turn that on, and that is it. And if you go back into edit mode from the top view and select this one and X with the E, extrude another one, rotate it around, you can see that you have the same form, and it is always available for you to extrude if you need. Rotate and scale. You can also use another way of doing this. You can use geometry to do that. And what you can also do is do start and end mapping, and this is going to govern where your tube is going. If you don't want it along the whole of the curve, you can use these factor start and factor end to govern where you want to have your object. Another way of governing how your object looks, the curve looks, is to use the profile of your object. Now I have gone into the object in here, and if I grab one of these vertices in here, you can see how it shapes my curve. This is a new feature from Blender 3, and I'm still testing it out, but you can see that it's possible to get rather nice forms out of this profile type of thing. What you can also do is bevel with using an object as a bevel. That means that you will create another Bezier curve and use that as the form of your object. So if I go in here and I add another curve, call it a Bezier circle. Oops, sorry. I'm in edit mode, I guess. Yeah. So I will add a circle, move it on the y-axis away so you can see it, scale it down, and now I'll turn this into some kind of a form. I will grab this and move it on the x-axis and put it inside there. So if I now go in here and I select this object in here and I go into the bevel object, and in the object list I can see the Bezier circle, my curve will now look like this in here. So if I scale this, it will scale the object. If I rotate this, it probably rotate on the y-axis actually. No, it doesn't do anything. But if I go in here and I edit my object so that I grab one of these vertices and move it over here, it will change the way my object looks like. So that's how you do a bevel with an object. And if you delete this bevel object, then your mesh, or actually the beveled curve, will return to its original form without the bevel. But while you have it, if you let's say that you wanted to have this form and keep that as a starting point for something different, you can right click on this and say convert to mesh. Now there's no longer a connection between this object in here and your previously curved object. It's now a mesh, and now you can use all the mesh tools that you have. The next thing we want to do is to extrude along a curve. For this I will modify this cube a little. I will scale it on the y-axis, make it rather big, scale a bit more on the y-axis. Then I will move the object origin here at the end, select that part, cursor to selected, object, set origin to 3D cursor. And then I will move the object to the center of the world, cursor to world origin, and then snap selection to cursor. I will then add a Bezier curve in the Z view, Shift A, curve, Bezier, move it on the x-axis so I can see it, scale it up on the x and scale it up. I can now select this object here that has no edge loops at the moment. I have to add a bunch of edge loops so that it has some vertices with which it can bend. So I will just use the mouse scroll wheel to give it a lot of vertices and a couple of enters to lock them in place. Now with this object selected and in object mode, I go into my modifier stack, and in here I find one called curve. Now if I say curve object is the Bezier curve, and I have to experiment with the axis. The axis is apparently y in this one. If I now edit this object here, let's say that I go into my top view and add an extra vertex with an E, I'll just extrude it and extrude another one over there and rotate this, extrude one in here and rotate, and extrude one more and rotate it that way. Now you can see that my object actually follows the curve. So if I scale this object, you can see how the cube that I have is lining out with the object. Or if I scale this object here, you can see how it still follows the curve. And since the curve ends here, that's why it points out directly into the other end. So if I scale it still, it doesn't have anything that it would like need any forming. So, but if I go in here and extrude this one more time, I rotate it, you can see that it is now following the curve once more. So again, this is one of those basic techniques that you may or may not find useful somehow, but you need to know how to do this. if this becomes necessary for you. I will scale this on the Z for 0 so that I get everything in the same level. And now you can see that the objects are again in the same plane. And since this is a mesh, you can apply this modifier like so. And now it's no longer connected to the curve, so it's just a mesh, and you can scale it as a mesh, as you would a mesh. The next thing I will explain to you is how to use empty objects. So to do that, I need to delete this, and I'll just give myself a new general type of file. No, don't save it. Empties are listed in your Shift-A menu. Here they have their own menu, and as you can see, you can have a plane axis or an arrows or a single arrow or circle, cube, sphere or cone. All of these are not real objects. They are not meshes, they're not curves. You cannot use them for basically anything except holding a place in space. So sometimes it's necessary to remember where you had this object in here. So when you have its origin as it is in this geometry, and you go Shift-A, add an empty with arrows and scale it a little, you can see that this empty is now where you had your object. So if I move this cube to a random place like this, without my, and I would also lose the the location of the 3D cursor. Without this empty here, it would be hard to be able to replace the cube where it was. But when I select the empty and I Shift S and snap the cursor to the selected, and then snap the cube back to the selected object. So snap cursor to selected, then snap the object I want to the cursor, selection to cursor. It is now in the same place where it was. Sometimes you want to take it all the way to vertex level, so you pick one vertex, you snap the cursor to it, and then you add another empty, Shift-A, empty, plane axis this time. And now you have the location, the precise location of this corner in the cube. So empties are very handy because they know their place in your scene, and you can snap to the empties. There's one more extra use of the empties, and the extra use of the empties is how to add an empty as an image. So again, snap your cursor to world origin, Shift-A, empty, and an image. Now it doesn't show anything, it doesn't have any content, but when you go to the empty tab in here, in the object data properties, and you say display it as an image, then you can open the image in here. So I experienced yet another Blender crash. I don't know what happened there, but I will just go back to where I was. So I was deleting this cube, I was adding an empty as an image, scale it up, go to my empty, say display as image, and open an image from my Dropbox, Blender patterns. I take this Alto vase, not in here but from Blender backgrounds, this one, and as I open it up it becomes part of my background. Now this will not show up in any render, so you can leave them there because it is an empty and it won't show. I want to create a mesh that looks like this vase, so by far the easiest way to do that is to use the curves, which I just showed you. So I'll go to my top view and I will add a curve circle, scale it up a little, go into edit mode and move this vertex in here. I'll grab this one and move it in here. As you can see, it's following the curve quite nicely, but in here I only have a couple of vertices, so this one wouldn't work. But if I select two of these vertices and go right click on these and say subdivide, I get another vertex which I can move in here, and by rotating it and scaling it up and down, I can get it to be useful as such. I need another vertex in here, so I will just click this one and shift click this one, right click and give me a subdivide, and move this vertex here to the side. Now I can move this one further down the road and pick this one and subdivide by right clicking and subdividing. This one probably should go somewhere here, and I will rotate it, scale it up, move it a little, move this one somewhere here, scale it. So you get the point. I'm just moving and adding vertices as I need. And I'm not going to try to make this perfect inside in form or anything. I'll just give you an idea of how to do this. This one and this one need to be subdivided to get this vertex in. I just want this vertex to move, so I'll just grab it in here. Oh, it's pretty nice. Yeah, so I'll just add one more vertex in between here. Then grab it here. Rotate and scale. Take this one in here. Scale a little, and this is close enough to my purposes for now. So again, if I went to do a quick render of this, we won't see anything because there is nothing to show. So instead of doing that, I will right click on my curve and I will convert that into a mesh. And now I have a bunch of vertices with which I can add a face. Then I will extrude it on the Z axis and scale it on the not Z axis, because all the alto vases are slightly, they fall out a little. So then I will lose the top with the X only faces. And now I can lose the image because I don't need that anymore. And I will then select the object and use a modifier called solidify. I will solidify on the outside like so. And move it up just a little so that I can see the axis. So G on the Z, and with the shift key down it moves very slowly. That should be fine. Then add a plane as a table. Shift A, plane, scale 100. And for this plane I want to give a material. Oh, Blender went down again. So having crashed Blender twice and found out that this particular version that I was using is likely to crash when adding materials, I had to reinstall Blender, and currently I'm using a 3.2.2 instead of 3.1.2. You may want to do the same thing. The only thing I was going to show you at this point was how to make this into a real glass vase. So to do that I was going to add a plane and scale it up 20 times so that I have some kind of a table surface. Give this a material. I will just make it a color, a base color and a blue type, like so, and then use this and give it also. But here, instead of using a surface, I'm going a principled BSDF shader. I'm going to go for glass shader and give it a nice green tint so that it's different from the other one. And I'll copy this lamp, Shift D, and put it inside G down. So when I now go into my preview, I can see that it looks like this. And if I switch my render engine to cycles, it will look like this. And this will take some time. So I will start the render and I will pause the video until I have a nice render from it. But let's see what we're going to see in the camera. Go back into the view tab and in here turn camera to view. Like so. So I will now render this and it will take some time, so bear with me and be back when I do the next part. Well, you know, using my laptop to do renders like this is like watching paint dry. It's been doing this now for about 5 minutes. Remaining time is 1 hour 49 minutes, so I don't think I'm gonna watch this through. But as you can see, this is how you create an alto vase starting from a curve. Wow, this was a pain of a video to record, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway.